My name is Summer Curl, and today we're going to be talking about the who, what, when, where, why, and how of an art movement known in America as Abstract Expressionism. This was a movement that occurred in New York after World War II. It is also commonly known as action painting. It is characterized by the way artists created the piece of art, whether that be dripping or flinging paint, or the rapid, careful strokes of artists' paintbrush. Although the movement seems to be led by painters, it also involved and united sculpting, photography, and drawing. The term abstract expressionism was coined by Alfred Barth in 1929, but was later popularized by Robert Coates when he applied it to artists like Pollock and de Kooning. Now that we've talked about what our movement was about, let's look into the time period of abstract expressionism. Though the term abstract expressionism was used earlier, the actual movement began in 1940 when many artists moved from Europe to New York. In 1946, the New Yorker critic Robert Coates coined the term. Later that year, Betty Parsons Gallery opened in New York. In 1947, William de Kooning blends Cubism, Surrealism, and Expressionism, calling his art action painting. In 1948, Mark Rothko changes his art tactics by using his rectangular color blocks to portray the condition of a man. In 1950, Franz Kline had his first solo exhibition. In 1951, famous art critic Harold Rosenberg publishes his article, The American Action Painters. In 1955, in contrast to Rosenberg's article, critic Clement Greenberg publishes his American Type Painting article. In 1961, there was a growth in interest of collage beginning the end of the abstract expressionism art movement. Later that same year, Harold Greenberg published After Abstract Expressionism, arguing that the art type had degenerated. Now we'll move on to where the movement took place. After the War and Great Depression, many artists fled to America, mostly New York. Most galleries were firmly rooted in the Manhattan area. After a long reign, Paris was robbed of its title as leader of modern art by no other than New York. One of the many art forms that influenced the abstract expressionism movement was Cubism, which was heavily shaped by Picasso, shown here. Cubism explored form, figures, and objects. There was usually a unity between a depicted scene and the canvas surface. Surrealism was mostly influenced by Andre Breton, who is shown here. Surrealism began in the 1920s, and most artists from the abstract expressionism movement dabbled in this type of art. The main interest was the unconscious mind, along with the theories of psychiatrist Carl Jung. Existentialism was the third major influence on abstract expressionism art. It was backed by critic Harold Rosenberg after his action painting article. The focus of existentialism was personal experience, ethics, and freedom of choice. Formalism was another style of art that influenced abstract expressionism. It was based solely on the visual aspects of the piece of art. Formalism's primary critic was Clement Greenberg, shown here. The art was composed of color, composition, line, and texture. Jackson Pollock confessed to gaining inspiration by the jazz music he listened to as he was painting. And one of the most important articles of the time period titled Pollock as the greatest living artist in America. His most popular art is shown here, Lavender Mist. William de Kooning, second to Pollock, was the most popular artist of the time period. Most of his work blended styles of Cubism, Expressionism, and Surrealism. While his paintings of women may be most popular, de Kooning also painted landscapes and abstracts. His most famous art is shown here. Hans Hofmann moved to America in 1930. He became a close friend to already well-known Jackson Pollock. His art blended styles from Cubism, Expressionism, and Surrealism. Most of his art was focused on nature. His most popular piece of art is here, The Conjurer. Most popularly known for his black and white abstracts, which were said to look like calligraphy, Franz Klein was born in Pennsylvania and worked odd jobs until making his way to New York. He's said to be mostly inspired by de Kooning and his own unconscious mind. Mark Rothko was known as one of three chief inspirers of color-filled painting. His work blended Expressionism and Surrealism. He was influenced by mythology and philosophy. His most important art is shown here, Four Darks in Red. Clyfford Still, like Rothko, was a chief inspirer of colored field painting. Still studied painting in college and later became a teacher at Washington State. He was a longtime friend of Rothko and Pollock. His most famous piece of art was 1948C, shown here. These are the top 5 most recognizable famous arts of the abstract expressionism movement. Number 1, Lavender Mist, Jackson Pollock. 2, Red, Brown, and Black, Rothko. Number 3, Door to the River, de Kooning. Number 4, Chief, Franz Klein. I hope you enjoyed this small look into abstract expressionism movement with me, Summer Curl. Thank you very much.